Coming up tonight, a shocking and bold act of criminality. The Justice Center on Grand Bahama broken into early this morning. Plus, another life lost on the streets of New Providence. Police are calling for calmer heads and better conflict resolution. And later, from the bottom to the top of the music industry, meet recording artist Smooths and hear his plans to grow the local music scene. Stay tuned for that story and more as Our News Weekend starts now. This is Our News Weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Megan Shepard. A brazen and shocking crime was uncovered in Grand Bahama this morning. Several courtrooms in the Magistrate Court building were burglarized. Officer in charge of the Northern Bahamas, Assistant Commissioner of Police Bernard B.K. Bonamy, says officers were called to the Justice Center shortly after 8 a.m.
Officers visited the scene and I can confirm that 3 or 4 doors to the magistrate courts were kicked in. Filing the cabinets appear to be tampered with. The initial report is that sometime around 7:30, the security officer, while making checks of the surrounding building, noticed a number of screens that had been tampered with.
ACP Bonamy says within 2 hours, officers had a suspect in custody.
The 45-year-old male from Seagrape is in police custody and will be assisting us with the investigation. At this time, we cannot say everything is stolen. The magistrates are there to check in with the clerks to confirm if everything has been stolen. Through the day, we're going to interview him and question him. Hopefully, by now and next week, we should have him charged with several matters to prepare before the courts.
Now, the courts are not manned by a security officer overnight, but rather checked on a daily basis. However, there are several security cameras in place.
I've been told that sometime on the weekend you have magistrates who come in to do some work. So there's always some checks of the building. There are some security cameras there, which has assisted us with this investigation.
When asked if he believes this was a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence,
I don't want to speculate at this time. It's too early in the investigation, so we'll have to see if anything is missing and do a proper investigation to determine that, sir.
And back here in the capital, police are following significant leads into an overnight homicide in the area of Rosedale Street off Mackey Street. Police press liaison Chief Superintendent Chrislyn Skippings telling media on the scene the shooting occurred shortly before 11:30 p.m.
Information thus far suggests that the victim was standing in front of a club here on Rosedale Street when a dark-colored truck pulled up. It is reported that a male who was on the back of the truck opened fire on the victim, fatally striking him.
Chief Superintendent Skippings confirming the victim was known to police and being electronically monitored. Member of Parliament for Centerville, Jomo Campbell, encouraging the community to do their part in keeping those on bail accountable.
Just as a family or friend, to ensure that those persons who may be involved in the justice system in the Bahamas as a defendant are home at the appropriate hours, are where they're supposed to be, are signing in on time, are charging their ankle bracelets, are aware of their surroundings, because any life loss is very unfortunate.
He says he is confident that officers will bring the perpetrators before the courts.
As you can see, recently in the Supreme Courts in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, there has been a shift in the decision of grant of bail, and what has happened here is an example as to why that has taken place.
Now at this time, Skipping says she does not believe this was a retaliation killing, but rather an unfortunate outcome due to a lack of conflict resolution skills. However, she did make this appeal.
I want to encourage friends of persons who have been shot. Let's not seek to retaliate. When we retaliate, the problem escalates and it continues.
In other news, the Department of Aviation is zoning in on infrastructural developments for Family Island Airport. Aviation Director Dr. Kenneth Romer says an audit is underway to see what each airport needs. Berthany McDermott reports.
As the Bahamas continues to see record tourism numbers, the state of Family Island airports continues to be a sore spot. That's because many of them are in poor shape. In light of this, Aviation Director Kenneth Romer says a key point is addressing the state of infrastructure. The government launched a request for a proposal to design, operate, and maintain those airports.
We are now evaluating the interested concessionaires who submitted an interest in these islands. We are very pleased in what we are seeing as a result of these submissions.
While there are 14 airports on the list, in the short term, he says critical infrastructure concerns will be addressed. Some of those airports include the Leonard M. Thompson International Airport in Abaco, Exuma International Airport, North Eleuthera International Airport, and the Long Island International Airport in Deadman's Key. He also says the airport authority is addressing issues at the North Eleuthera Airport.
Short-term fixes like air conditioning units, additional seating and sheltering and fans. These are things that we could address now while we're in the process of giving a longer-term solution. So this week, you'll find out that there will be air conditioners arriving in North Eleuthera. There are going to be some seats arriving in North Eleuthera. These are the conveniences that helps to paint the narrative that's better in the Bahamas.
But North Eleuthera won't be the only airport to get infrastructural upgrades. Romer says an audit is being conducted on all of the Family Island airports.
And even airports not in the 14 airports are still being targeted for some development. So we're serious about infrastructural development. Islands deserve better, and our commitment is to really support them in terms of their touristic development.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
The Acklands High School officially named after A. Loftus Roker, a former politician and resident of Acklands. On Friday, the Ministry of Education and government officials traveled to the island for the official renaming ceremony. Our Italia Hall was there.
A. Loftus Roker is described as a passionate and dedicated public servant who advocated for many across the country. The retired lawyer, politician, and Acklands native is a former student of the now A. Loftus Roker High School. Roker sharing what this honor means to him.
That's the greatest thing that they could have done for me. I'm happy about that. That's the only thing that they offered me that I wanted.
Prime Minister Philip Davis says Roker played a critical role in one of the most important moments in the country's history.
In December of 1972, as one of only 15 in the national delegation, led by the then Prime Minister Pindling, he traveled to London to negotiate the terms of our country's independence. He did this because, in his own words, he believed in freedom. Only 4 of the signatories to our independence agreement are still with us today. And so we are grateful that we can still turn to Loftus for reminiscence, for his first-hand accounts of critical moments in Bahamian history, for guidance, and of course, for his very candid views.
Education Minister Glenys Hannah Martin says it was most fitting to rename the school after Roker.
And an action in which we are well pleased. May all who pass through this school in the years to come understand the beautiful legacy of this institution and its meaning to their own lives, and the stimulus to their incredible potential and the grand possibilities that await them. May they always remember the man whose name this school bears.
Awards were also presented to the honoree. A plaque and school sign was also unveiled. Reporting for Our News Weekend, I'm Italia Hall.
Now for that story and all of today's top stories, be sure to visit ournews.bs. And remember, you can always share your favorite stories on Facebook at Our News Bahamas. Still to come on Our News Weekend, vital ocean current on the brink of collapse. We'll tell you how this could impact our small island nation and what global leaders plan to do about it.
Doctors Hospital has reimagined primary care. We have invested to improve our health system, ensuring that accessible, affordable, world-class clinical care is closer to you. Your relationship with a primary care provider shapes the foundation of your overall health. Our new, modern primary care facilities are where critical diagnosis and true personalized treatment begin. With locations across New Providence, Grand Bahama, and Exuma, we invite you to experience the Doctors Hospital difference. Book your next appointment at clinics.doctorshos.com.
Scientists say a vital system of ocean currents could collapse within a few decades if the world continues to pump out planet-heating pollution. A new study published recently found the collapse could come as early as 2025. Some of the most vulnerable regions are small island states that contribute the least to global warming, like the Bahamas, where the impacts of climate change are already evident with eroding coastlines and record-setting storms such as Hurricane Dorian. Charles Hamilton is a climate change advisor in the Office of the Prime Minister, and he says Caribbean leaders agreed they would not return to the UN's climate change conference unless tangible steps are taken.
We know that historically, countries like the Bahamas have not contributed much to global greenhouse gases, but we're at the front lines of experiencing climate change. And just like those folks who live along the coast in Florida, and yes, they may be more affluent, they're also being impacted by climate change.
The report actually highlights the need for immediate and concerted efforts to combat climate change. What makes the threat of this predicted collapse more sobering is the potential disruption to agriculture in regions such as India, South America, and West Africa, jeopardizing the livelihoods of billions of people, especially those in countries dependent on food imports.
We will not leave COP27 without a loss and damage fund, and we will not return if we don't see that happen, because we know that it's something that we can't absorb by ourselves. And so I think it's about trying to level the playing field, and for us, that's just the canary in the coal mine, seeing what's happening in Florida, and we don't want to see that happening here in our country. And so that's why we're advocating so hard, and that's why we're working the way we're doing.
When our news comes back from the break, we continue to highlight the fibroids epidemic. Medical officials want you to know you don't have to live with the pain as treatment options are expanding. Plus, the National Baptist Convention has a new president at the helm. Hear the 3-year plan on the other side of this break. Stick with us. Welcome back. Tonight, we continue our series to raise awareness on what health officials are calling an epidemic, uterine fibroids. As you may recall, 80% of women of African descent will experience symptoms of fibroids at one point. While you can't prevent it, you can mitigate the symptoms. But as interventional radiologist at Family Medicine Center, Dr. Mikhail Higgins tells us, a hormone naturally produced by the body, estrogen, also plays a major factor.
But the third place that is really sort of not known to a large extent is fat. Okay, so the more fat you have, the more naturally secreting and circulating estrogen you have.
Dr. Higgins also deems obesity as an epidemic for the region, particularly here in the Bahamas. He explains how these two conditions interact.
They're independent, but they do interact. And so if you imagine a woman who is low energy, fatigued, what's she less likely to do? Probably less inclined to exercise. If she's less inclined to exercise, what is she more likely to get? Obviously increased weight, increased fat. If she increases in weight and fat, now you have that fat that obviously increases estrogen production, and that estrogen now increases the fibroids.
Now, when it comes to treatment, there are several options. The most widely known procedure is a hysterectomy.
It's usually an open surgery where they remove the uterus with or without the ovaries. The second option would be an open, so a full incision in the abdomen to remove the fibroids individually, where they're sort of literally scooping out individual fibroids.
Recently introduced to the region within the past 2 years is a procedure known as uterine artery embolization. Dr. Higgins explains that the doctor gains access to a blood vessel in the groin area to access an artery that supplies the fibroid.
The fibroids, like any tumor, it sort of grows its own blood network so that it can get its own oxygenated blood without having to compete. And so it takes that oxygenated blood and it continues to grow and grow essentially living high off the hog, essentially gaining that blood supply from the uterus. And so what we do in that situation is we identify that blood supply and then we block it off using little particles, some of which in certain situations may not dissolve, other situations they do dissolve. And what they do is they block off the blood supply just long enough for the fibroids to die.
He says 90% of patients return to normal menstrual cycles, and 2 out of 3 women see a 50% reduction in bulk systems following this procedure. And be sure to tune into Our News Weekend tomorrow evening as we conclude our series with a first-hand account of a Bahamian woman now enjoying life fibroid-free. While we introduced you to several top 50 under 40 honorees a few weeks ago, the list, which came out in July, recognizes several professionals from different industries, all under the age of 40. Because it's the Jubilee year, 50 professionals were selected. We asked several of them for their advice on working while you may not think people are watching.
I try to live my life as I'm working unto God and not unto men. And I think once you do that with the intention of not necessarily being recognized for what you do, but you're just serving, I think it will come with time.
Keep pushing, keep going. Everything is with purpose. A lot of times we think, am I being seen? Is what I'm doing even matters? And then we don't realize who's watching us.
And entertainer Jaquay Dasquay Adderley and Our News reporter Berthany McDermott agreed.
If I could encourage someone out there, when God leads you, follow. Trust me, when He leads you, follow. Every day you're going to love the outcome, and every day someone's going to show you that they appreciate your life, your talent, your time, and what you have to offer to the world.
Someone is always watching, especially when you do good work and you always put your best foot forward. And you do your work with integrity, people are always watching and people always notice. So while today it may seem as though no one sees, someone sees, and eventually I feel like your time will come where people will recognize you for that.
The Bahamas National Baptist Convention has a new president. Philip McPhee is taking up the mantle after the passing of the late Dr. Lloyd Smith. McPhee says the plan is to continue preaching and teaching the Word of God and remain the voice of the Bahamian people.
We just don't parade or display a interest in the makeup of our nation, but in the social fabric of our nation, we are felt probably more than any other denomination because we are with the people 7 days of the week. We go out in mornings to make sure that children who are hungry, unfed, to go to school. Many of our churches have opened up their sanctuary and their youth centers to feed.
Baptist remains the largest denomination in the Bahamas, with churches on just about every island. McPhee says the plan is to continue its objectives and ensure the convention's presence is felt throughout the Bahamas.
We are obligated to thank men like Dr. Smith, certainly our Christian, as you know, I know you all are aware that the Christian Council president is a Baptist, right? A very important Baptist, and will also play a very important role in the new administration moving forward. So we are definitely on a way of upward mobility. Our main concern is that justice is served, not just seemed to be served, but actually is served.
And still to come, a Bahamian recording artist looking to make a major impact in the local music industry. Hear all about his journey in tonight's art and entertainment segment when Our News Weekend returns. Welcome back. And now it's time for a look at your weather forecast over the next few days. And finally, we leave you with this story of Bahamian recording artist Smooths, who says his love for music came later in his adolescence. After his first attempt at rapping, he says there was no turning back. Smooths shares his passion for home on the new track titled The Bahamas in tonight's arts and entertainment segment with Jean Joseph.
21-year-old Dre Darcy grew up in southern New Providence and says he is determined to make a name for himself despite his environment. Dre, who performs under the moniker Smooths, has big plans for the local music industry with his record label From the Bottom Records. Smooths says he invested a lot in his craft, becoming self-sufficient and using his resources more wisely.
Paying for studio time is draining your pockets, so I had to find a different avenue. I invested in my own studio. I have my equipment, and I just record my own music now. In 2020 is when I started doing it professionally, like distributing it to all the major platforms, having my Spotify verified and YouTube verified and stuff.
Smooths is pushing forward with his career, simultaneously growing the label. He signed his first artist, Breon, and is looking for more talent.
Growth with the record label is, I'm seeing growth, but it's not no big overnight thing, because these things don't happen overnight.
The young entrepreneur also plans to expand into apparel.
I want to expand on this. This is my clothing line. It has my logo, the same record label logo from the bottom. That's my record label logo. So I also want to expand on clothing as well.
With all this going on, it's understandable that he missed the Independent Song Competition's entry deadline, but he still wanted to capitalize on the independence buzz. His recent release, The Bahamas, is an ode to his beloved homeland.
I apparently saw the post too late. When I read the fine print, it was already past the date, and I didn't even start writing yet, so I said to myself, let me just create my own piece and I'll just distribute it. And that's what happened. So I went around various locations around Nassau to show tourists what you can eat, where you can go, and things that you can do.
Smooths says he enjoyed every bit of the process, especially recording the music video, now available on YouTube.
If you look at it good, I actually was sitting down eating a conch salad and drinking a colette at the fish fry, just enjoying the view. At a certain time, I had to stop and record the video, but then I mostly was enjoying myself.
You can find more of Smooths' music on YouTube and most streaming platforms and judge for yourself. Until next time, reporting for Our News, Arts and Entertainment, I'm Jean Joseph.
Thanks so much, Jean, and thank you for joining us for Our News Weekend. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Megan Shepard. Have a safe and wonderful weekend.